How you doing, everybody? Phil Murphy and Laurie Horesh here. This is the NFL Brekkie Show, presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day in the Next Gen Ford Everest. And conquering is on everybody's mind, Laurie. Right now, all roads lead to Arizona, the toaster in the desert site of Super Bowl 57. We are inside of 1 month until the greatest annual game on American soil, one of the greatest annual games in all of world sport. Super Bowl 57. We are 1 game removed from the last 8. That's coming up later today on ESPN, Cowboys and Bucks. But in some ways, Laws, we are into the last 8. I don't want to sound like a pessimist. This is a happy show. This is the people's show. But there are only 8 games remaining in the entire NFL season. The 8th from last is, again, today, Bucks Cowboys.
Yeah, we're beyond the business end of the season now. We are at the pointiest ends, and that sums up the emotions in certain fan bases right now. We can touch on that a little bit later. But look, this is Super Wildcard Weekend now. That is what has been deemed since we added the extra playoff team from both conferences. We expanded what Wildcard Weekend entailed. And to be honest, look, we can be critical of decisions made by teams, players, NFL, all over the place throughout the season. But I'm all on board with this. I think the proof's in the pudding. What we've been delivered for Wildcard Weekend, again, has been ridiculous drama and fireworks. That's why it's in the show title. This was palpitating stuff. Even the games that we thought on paper looked like there might be a blowout. The Bills up against third-string quarterback for the Dolphins in Skylar Thompson. That's a narrow nail-biter. The Bengals and Ravens without Lamar Jackson and playing all sorts of, you want to say huge change-up. They're still running the ball with their quarterback, but playing with a very different tier of skill set at quarterback. That one still comes down to one of the all-time sliding door moment plays, and we'll touch on that as the show goes on. But look, this is the People's Show. This is the People's Mailbag is open. That's how we're going to kick this thing off for the first half or so of the show, first half an hour-ish. We're going to throw it open. We've got some comments and questions that have come in overnight already, and they're already flowing in. Brad Bolt wants to know, do we get the fastest 3 minutes in sports recap, as Phil called Laurie? You called it by me last week. Perhaps. We will see. You might get the fastest 3 minutes of foreboding and projecting pain.
He's halfway home.
I'm halfway home, exactly. So we'll see. It might be something that comes along a little later in the show. But look, it's the People's Show. We're going to open this thing up right off the bat. So, Phil, we had some questions come in. Where do you want to kick this thing off? Which one? You have a look at what we've been sent in, peering at the rundown. Which topic and talking point should we kick this thing off from what we've seen over the last 48 hours and the fallout that comes?
Well, anytime we have this time of year, teams are eliminated in every game. It's a zero-sum game. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, and the losing side often is the first step is on the first tee box. So I think we know that we're going to be talking. We have a good question about the Giants. We have a good question about the Bills. Those teams are going to be here next week. I think we can focus first on the teams that are no longer with us. And I think one of the top ones, I'm going to go with one from Charlie Work on Twitter at BlueGrad, sending us a question. What's the state of Brandon Staley's job after Saturday? The Chargers blowing a 27-point lead, the 3rd biggest blown lead in NFL playoff history, the 5th biggest blown lead in any NFL game, period. 1 year after, frankly, coaching malpractice cost the Chargers a playoff berth. Here again, some question marks in play calling and scheme and just an entire categorical shift in the second half, a tale of two halves. Doug Peterson found some magic in the bag. Trevor Lawrence driving the boys to a comeback. Laz, what do you think is the state of Brandon Staley's job, per Charlie's question?
Well, I'm sure Brandon Staley's sweating like I'm sweating here wearing this Cowboys 1973 edition Letterman jacket.
What else are you wearing?
What else am I wearing? Well, the beads are on, of course. And if I just lean back a little bit.
Here we go. Give the people what they want. People
flashes. Well, let's try this one. Flashes of some stars and stripes. America's team tights. They're not pants. They are tights. I can confirm that. So I'm sweating in that, given it's almost 30 degrees in Sydney, and might be a heated, tense matchup coming up later today at 12:15 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And I'm sure Brandon Staley's sweating as well. Because, yes, we're seeing game management and game strategy, which falls under the head coach's purview. We're seeing failures there, and we've seen it consistently in some big spots the last couple of years. I think there's a couple of things to weigh here when it comes to Staley's job security. We also got a side question in just asking, is he a good football coach? Yes, Brandon Staley is a good football coach. He's one of the best game planners and defensive minds in the NFL. You can go ask players, you can go ask former coaches, pundits, people that have worked with him. That is the consistent feedback you get. This man's defensive mind and his ability to strategize in this 2023, 2022 version of the NFL where the game is, that is absolutely not just up to par, that is superb. But if the team is comfortable that they believe that these issues that have come up, blowing a massive 27-0 advantage and what we saw go down against the Raiders infamously and everything in between, even things like the 4th and 3 decision to kick a field goal, which they missed, that went against so much of what he has done in his coaching tenure, which is go for it in those aggressive situations, particularly when you're only going from a 10-point lead to a 13-point lead, which is not the biggest win probability swing you can find with a field goal. If you're confident that he and his coaching staff can overcome and provide the necessary tenacity and closing ability, I don't want to say killer instinct because I think it's a little wishy-washy, a phrase to throw around, but the mentality to know when to hit certain buttons, including running the ball, including giving Austin Eckler more action in the second half with a lead. If you're confident he can do that, then he's a talented enough football mind. And I think he connects with his players well enough. And you listen to the comments that came from the locker room after the game. That's clear and evident that I would be more than open to retaining him. For me, when it comes to the Chargers coaching staff, the biggest issue is an offensive coordinator. Staley stays, Staley goes, whatever. That offensive coordinator and that offensive system and scheme needs an overhaul. We can't go through another game, a big game of Justin Herbert averaging 5 or 6 yards passing per attempt. And that's a simple stat. We can go into way more deeper, advanced analytics, but the offense struggles to breathe. It is constrained. It is restricted with his arm, his prodigious accuracy downfield, his creative ability. We're talking like someone whose arm strength sits in a tier with Josh Allen and probably Josh Allen alone. Patrick Mahomes in and around. There's some other names you can throw around. But that creative ability with his arm, for this offense to be so stuck in the mud so often, so uninspiring, and operate in such a short part of the field, Phil, you and me cannot come to another free agency show, draft show, trade deadline show. I don't care what it is. We can't come to another segment of that, again, asking them to add some speed. And I don't mean, oh, this guy's a punt returner. Let's play him at wide receiver and see what happens. Go and get some speed, because Keenan Allen's your best receiver, and we'll get into the Mike Williams decision a bit later if we want, but Keenan Allen's your best receiver, and he ran a 4.7 when I was in university. This is what we're talking about in terms of how they've built this scheme, this setup, the roster around it. Justin Herbert deserves his fair share of blame, whether you think he's, a favorite of journalists and pundits on social media or not. He deserves his blame. We also need to be, I think if one thing this season has taught us is we need to look at quarterbacks with the context around them, whether that's Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, it doesn't matter. We can't do this isolated. You have to look at the context around him, and that is the number one move for me. We're talking coaching. We're talking about the Chargers. Staley, okay, figure out if those intangibles you feel like he can improve upon, how that translates through their game day execution and their strategy in close situations. But really, for me, the biggest coaching question is an offensive coordinator and the system that surrounds it.
And Laz, you do make a good point that the players do seem to support him because he has had their back at the podium with things like concussion protocol and returning from injury. And then you see the moment where Joey Bosa slams his helmet and Staley hands it back to him. And Bosa immediately slams it again in front of him, something that I can't imagine would happen in New England or in Pittsburgh or some of these other coaches that players do trust, but also they trust that the result is going to come with it. I mean, there is something to be said about the Jaguars having Doug Peterson, whatever he said at his halftime talk, to get the Jaguars to come in and execute better in the second half. And they made adjustments, and their receivers had greater separation. But we keep alluding to the last year, and I just want, for those who may not remember the specifics of it, in Week 18, the final game of the NFL season, it was the featured Sunday night Week 18 game. Because of a Colts loss to the Jags earlier in the day, which nobody saw coming, I think the Colts were like $1.10 on the money line to win that game. It was a rare situation in which the Chargers and Raiders would have both made the playoffs with a tie. To their credit, the teams went toe-to-toe. I think it was 29 all after regulation, including a game-tying touchdown by Herbert on the final play. They go to overtime. They exchange field goals. The Raiders are driving down. And with less than a minute left, they are running out the clock. They're not taking knees, but they're handing off inside. They're letting it tick down. They're not trying to get closer. Brendan Staley calls an inexplicable timeout in case the Raiders were to miss a long field goal that many of their players tacitly admitted post-game was never coming. Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth on the call were not second guessing it, first guessing it. After the game, you saw Austin Eckler going up and talking to another Raiders player like, oh, you guys were going for the tie. Justin Herbert on the sideline, seeing him say, I never wanted a tie so bad. But for whatever reason, that aggressiveness that Staley has shown, he wasn't able in that moment to discern that now is not the time, wasn't able to read the situation. And he seemed to be the only one in that arena eager to prove his football mettle. And it ended up giving the Raiders an opportunity, or forcing the Raiders then to try and move the sticks so the Chargers wouldn't get the ball back. Well, now they're in range for a 47-yard field goal, which Daniel Carlson hit. So that's last year. That's what stuck with Chargers fans all through the northern summer, all through the season. Anytime there was even a situation like you're talking about, 4th and short, makeable field goal, 13 points versus 10, there's just this doubt that Staley is going to have the proper opinion and proper play call in those fork in the road situations. And in this game, the Chargers ran 29 plays with the lead in the second half. They ran the ball on 7 of them. 7 of 29. It comes out to 24%. Across the entire NFL this season, any game, any team, it is the lowest percentage of designed run plays for a team with the lead in the second half of any game. And second place is also the Chargers. So that, listen, I'm not trying to be like 3 yards in cloud of dust, old school offense, but there's something to be said about you have what should be an insurmountable lead. You have Austin Eckler, one of the most versatile ball carriers in the NFL. He got 6 touches in the second half. 6. He had 4 more yards than you and I did, Laz. He was taken out of the game, and that coupled with a terrific second half from Trevor Lawrence, which we'll get to. But now we have 2 really high-profile situations in which there was coaching malpractice that cost the Chargers their season. How many strikes do you get? There will be changes to the coaching staff. The question for the Spanos family and everybody who's involved with the organization is, does it need to start at the top, or is it sufficient to start with the coordinator position? But then no, as the old baseball adage goes, 3 strikes and you're out. This cannot happen again. Or you're going to waste the window of a Justin Herbert rookie contract, which we know is the most valuable thing in the NFL, to have an A-level quarterback. And to your point, Herbert missed a touchdown throw in the first half that would have stretched out the lead. He wasn't perfect, but to have that quarterback on that contract, the window is closing. It's just going to be harder once he's on his second deal to put together a competitive team. So that's the question that has to be answered this offseason. Whilst there is a big, shiny toy out there who wants to get back in the head coaching game, and that's Sean Payton.
Yeah, and look, you go deeper into the Chargers and the ownership. This is not an ownership group that has been the most cash splashy group that will just throw away contracts with heaps of money left on their deals. And we do see some franchise, will walk away from a coach that's got 4 years left on their deal at $5+ million a year, and there's no salary cap on the coaching docket there. So there's no competitive disadvantage for some franchises, but that's not everyone. And the Chargers have been more conservative than others over their history, particularly, saying this ownership. I will say that, yeah, I think this comes down to just that closing ability, and that extends. You mentioned Joey Bosa's name. We see it's a phrase that you're hearing used more and more about particularly pass rushers, closers. Do you have closers? And, think about what DeMarcus Ware was, particularly with the Denver Broncos, which you'll remember very, very fondly, and how he closed out some massive moments on that Super Bowl run, in the Super Bowl and the games preceding it. What he did against the New England Patriots might be one of the greatest games he had of his career. You think about what Von Miller was bringing to the Buffalo Bills pre-injury. He was that closer. Aaron Donald is...
Or the Broncos in the Super Bowl you mentioned. Super Bowl 50 MVP Von Miller.
There you go. Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald. He's one of one, and he's the best defensive player I've ever seen. But we've seen what happens. Hey, we need you to just win this matchup and put this thing to bed. Now, the Chargers have spent. The Chargers do have Joey Bosa. They do have Khalil Mack. The Chargers have those players out. They have Derwin James, where was the closer? Where was the closer when the Jags scored 5 consecutive drives to close the game and win the thing? Where was the closer. That extends from the coaching staff down to the players. And Joey Bosa, I sympathize with his frustration with the officials. You and me have gone round and round on that many times on this show, not to mention in DMs and on Twitter and everything, the frustration of the officials. But Joey Bosa is a leader on that team, and he's an all-pro level talent. Where was his composure and his closing mentality to go and shut the door on this thing in the second half? And not just him, but others. So I understand the frustrations that have flown out since, and he had some very, very colorful words to say about the men in stripes in the aftermath of that game. But yeah, that's the question that the football operation there and ownership needs to come to. Do we believe these guys can become better at closing with the tenacity needed and the composure needed in those settings? All right, next question. And I should say, Gary has fired in. We definitely saw the good coaches separate from the bad coaches over the weekend. Well, yeah.
And Laz, you want to say good coaches, bad coaches. The Giants have functionally the same team, and they went from an inept offense last year to now a team that is in the last 8 and has won a playoff game on the road and won a close playoff game on the road. That there's no better example than the importance of head coaching as to what we're seeing in New York.
All right. Well, you brought up the Giants there, so let's get to the next question here. And this comes in from Brad, who fired in a couple of them that a couple other folks have touched on, but I wanted to pick out this one. Danny Dimes, what type of contract are we looking at for Daniel Jones? Wherever this run for the Giants ends, wherever their overachievement of the 2022 season comes to a halt in 2023, now the calendar year ticking over, what type of contract do you see coming? And Phil, we were chatting, and not doing the show before the show, but this is a known thing that the Giants opted not to take on or kind of enter into his 5th year of the contract. That might prove just a little costly on the books.
It will, period, full stop, because they had the opportunity last year, and nobody faulted them for this in the moment. So I don't want a Monday morning quarterback. With what we saw of Daniel Jones through 4 years, his 5th-year option would have cost $23 million, and his performance to that point would not have justified $23 million. He had all the tools, big arm, high IQ, speed. I mean, I hate hearing how deceptively athletic he is when he keeps running by people. The guy ran a faster 40 than Josh Allen, ran a faster 40 than Patrick Mahomes. He's not slow. 17 carries on 78 yards. He was the leading rusher in that game yesterday, a game that had Saquon Barkley and Dalvin Cook in it. Your leading rusher was Daniel Jones. Some scripted, some off script. Decision-making has been fantastic. Coaching has galvanized around him. But now they don't have that option for a 5th-year option. They forewent it last offseason, $23 million. Well, if they're going to franchise tag him, now that's a $45 million tag on him, with Saquon Barkley being an unrestricted free agent this offseason as well. So Brian Daboll, you would think philosophically, what he saw happen in Buffalo and what the management there has said is that they want to build from within and sustain what they have, which leads me to believe they're tipping their hand. They want to keep both Barkley and Jones. Barkley, we know, is going to be expensive. Now, what kind of contracts do you get for Daniel Jones? You start looking around the league, and Ryan Tannehill's pushing $30 million a year. You could have had, again, Jones for $23 million. The contract for Jones is like a 4-year, $115, $120 million deal with a lot guaranteed. I mean, it could end up being a $60 million cost for them to pass up on Danny Dimes for the 1-year extension. It's the cost of success, and any Giants fan will tell you, hey, it's a problem we love to have. But man, you would prefer to hop in the time machine and say, wow, this guy's about to have a breakout season. Let's do the $23 million prove it deal to see if it is a flash in the pan and see how he counters to the counter, because teams, especially those in the NFC East, are going to have a year's worth of tape. They're going to be better prepared for Daniel Jones and this Giants offense next season, assuming he stays with the club. But now the Giants are in a position in which they have to invest and have to guarantee money for a player that we've seen guys have the 1-year peak and then recede. They don't know if this is the start of a trajectory or just the fact that people have been looking past Daniel Jones for the last 4 years, and there are adjustments that can be made. It's a precarious situation. They made the right decision in the moment, but because he's been very solid for them this season and was terrific against Minnesota yesterday, it's going to be a very costly one to the tune of, 8 figures if my math serves.
Yes, 8 figures. I agree with you. I'm pretty sure that's right.
8 figures.
9 figures?
Well, I
Eight
mean,
figures?
the higher cost, right? It's 123 million for one versus, 4 for 120 if that's the deal.
I think in a vacuum, I'd look at franchise tag and see if we continue to see the upward trajectory of the decision making, the processing on the field, and how we go in another year. Yes, tape spreading around the league and people getting a better feel for what he does and what Dayball does with him. But also, I want to see how he advances within that scheme, within that setup, and hey, maybe even a free agency wide receiver that provides a massive impact. No shots at Kenny Golladay, who had a massive block that went viral and got deserved attention yesterday on the broadcast. But I think they've got $54 million in cap space as it stands today. The tag takes up 40 plus. You've got deals to do with not just Saquon Barkley, but other players you might want to bring back. You can move things around and make that work. And I think the tag is still the option I'd go to. But yeah, this is one where it's hard to blame them in the moment. I think that made a lot of sense at that time. This is not like with the Cowboys when everyone was saying, sign him now to a $30 million deal, sign him now to a $30 million deal. They don't, they wait, and it costs them $40+ million a year. Different. You get to the place where you want to go to, but it costs you a little bit more along the way. But yeah, I'd expect that that's how we see this thing play out. Ideally, it's just the timing that's going to be interesting to see how it works out, because you do have two big names there, and you have one tag. I imagine the bean counting is going on in the back quickly. I imagine that there's been conversations already, but this is a unique one for the Giants. And I think whilst it's stressing and angsty to see how the books work out, this is a good problem to have, because you're finally in place again to be re-signing your talent. The amount of Giants high round picks that have exited the building without a second round pick has been laughable to outsiders and very sad and frustrating, I'm sure, for fans within the Giants colors. So they're now getting to a point where they're having good problems again, and you're seeing the flourishing of other picks like Dexter Lawrence, who has come on and deserving getting all-pro attention for his performance this season. But I would expect we see the tag for Jones, and then they immediately get to work. Ideally, they get to a number that they'd like to bring that thing down. I don't know, though, that you realistically, with the market the way it is, I don't know that you're going to be able to sign Daniel Jones for less than $40 million a year on a long-term deal.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to sort out for the Giants, certainly. And Laz, it's you look at the body of work in the season. He was terrific in the sample size we just saw. He only had 3 300-yard games for the season, and in today's NFL, that's probably below what you would expect for your traditional quarterback. And 2 of those 300-yard games came against the Vikings, comfortably the worst defense in the NFL in the second half of the year. Laz, another quarterback question we have. This one I wanted to make a point to shout out because of the effort it took for her to get this in. At Charlie on TV, my good friend Charlie Arnold, my tag team partner, my partner in crime, my delightful co-host. She's going to be on the sideline today for Bucs Cowboys, so she'll be providing a couple in-game reports there. She was on her flight and logged into the Wi-Fi to get this question in. While we're talking quarterbacks and long-term contracts, and I'm struggling to get the question up, but Laz, her question was, not saying this verbatim only because my app isn't working. Lamar Jackson not being on the sidelines, does that speak to anything to his long-term future as a Raven? What should we take away from it? And the background there is that Lamar Jackson was playing without any contract in place beyond this season. Very rare for any player to do, particularly a quarterback, where he's at in his contract cycle. He represents himself. He's his own agent. And we said on this show, or I said, gosh, week 8, week 9, the Ravens were, I guess week 9, they were 6-3. They started 7-3. And I was saying, man, if I'm Lamar Jackson, I go knock on the general manager's office and say, hey, let's get a deal now, because right now it looks like we both win if we get a deal done. What's happened is both sides, I fear, have had their viewpoint reinforced in Baltimore. In Lamar Jackson, his camp himself, saying that, yeah, you guys can't win without me. You can't get to the level you aspire to, and that is a fine organization. That is a championship level. You can't get there without me. You've constructed your entire team around my skill set. You should pay up. But the organization is going to say, well, we have concerns that have arisen in the past couple of years about durability. Last year was the knee, or I guess the ankle, and this year was the PCL. And anybody who suggests he should have played through that injury is just not wise, and they would
No.
not, with good conscience, do the same thing themselves. There's some circulation on some sports media outlets here stateside where people were suggesting that he should just, suck it up and play through the injury. Not that type of injury, not with what he has at stake. You go ahead.
RG3 posted out there on social media that he played without ligaments intact and without structural security in that part of his body and for his team. And, that's how he felt. That's how he felt to compete. And it's something that did drastically change the course of his career. You're talking about PCL injuries. You're talking about something that hasn't healed properly. Were the Baltimore Ravens going to win the Super Bowl this year? Look, there's a chance when you have game-breaking talent like that healthy on the field, but I don't think as the defense had come along, particularly after Roquan Smith had arrived, the numbers and the on-tape performance skyrocketed. But I don't necessarily think this was not a team I would have picked to emerge from the AFC and win a Super Bowl. It doesn't mean Lamar's sitting there going, we weren't going to win a ring anyway. I'm not competitive this season. I'm going to put my feet up. But from an outside standpoint, if I'm judging the moves I can't judge him taking care of his body and getting himself right when there was plenty of potential to do more damage if he wasn't 100% healthy in that part, especially in that part of his body, especially with the way he impacts a game with his legs and his arms. So, I know I jumped in, but I think you're right. But there's the massive chance here that both camps have dug in, and when both teams dig in and feel even more convicted about their stance, that's when the tension increases and increases and increases. The communication becomes tougher. And this is how you now do start to hear it's leaking out to the media. You don't know which side, that there's a non-0% chance that the Baltimore Ravens could look to trade Lamar Jackson. This, which you've landed this, you don't want to say generational talent because that is thrown around so much, but in terms of his mobility, his skill set, he is a superb and supremely rare quarterback talent. And I would love to, this is not someone I'd let leave my locker room, let leave the organization. I'd be more concerned with bringing him back and bringing in, I'm taking a few shots at offensive coordinators, but bringing in an offensive system, an offensive coordinator that is ready to mature his gameplay perhaps more than we've seen with Greg Roman in his time in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's a messy situation there that they need to sort out. It's the overwhelming topic in the offseason because of the trickle down. If they end up moving on from Jackson, it's not as easy as, hey, we're going to plug in Derek Carr and the Raiders will get Jackson and the Ravens will get Carr and everybody's all happy clappy. There's a lot that has to go in. There's significant trickle down there, or they could try and extend on I don't think he would take a short-term deal. I think he's right in that he deserves a long-term option, and there's going to be a team out there that's willing to take the chance when you have a guy who not all that long ago won an MVP. And maybe it's that conversation. Laz, I remember you and I in like week 3 or 4 of the season, I brought up his touches and how many times he was either getting hit or carrying the ball and just being touched by by the opposing team. And it was a high number. It's like 16 times a game he's getting hit. And it's something that I think schematically going forward, if you have any concern about his longevity, especially if there is perhaps now injury concern of a persistent knee or foot or ankle issue, for somebody who's kind of slight of build, very quick, very, very elusive, but inevitably he's going to take a shot or two when he's touching the ball and carrying aggressively that many times per game, maybe some schematic conservatism that would allow him to further his chance of playing out a full season. We saw just the night and day difference of the Ravens without him. Credit for the Ravens for even making that a game yesterday against the Bengals, but I thought Charlie's question was apt given where we were. Other side of that coin, Laws, that same game, Lamar to Carolina with Sean Payton making it. Brad, God bless you. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. But Laws, in that same game, other side of the coin, Bengals get the win. They do the deed. They get it across the finish line. We have a question from a name that you may see pop up on our social media channels, very active, with good reason, Ben Regal, who is my esteemed producer for NFL Blitz, massive Bills supporter, and to his credit, huge. He attended his first Bills game in person. He's from Northern Vermont. It's not like, he picked up the Bills recently. He has been a dedicated Bills fan since the early 90s. Something related to him when he saw them lose 4 Super Bowls in a row, and he has hitched his wagon and circled the wagons with the Buffalo Bills ever since. He attended his first Bills game a couple weeks ago, the first game after Damar Hamlin's on-field cardiac arrest, the home game where Nyheim Hines took the kickoff back for a touchdown. Ben was in the end zone seating that Hines ran to. So, terrific debut for him on site at Orchard Park. But Ben, as a Bills supporter, wants to know, how significant are the O-line injuries for the Bengals heading into next week via the Bills? Laz, I have some thoughts, but I will defer to you first.
How significant? We're going to have to see the maestro level performances, the cerebral attack, the quick read and quick release ability whilst maintaining aggression from one Joseph Burrow extended to a whole new tier. In my opinion, Burrow's thrown himself into, I think there's a one-man tier at the top of the NFL quarterback rankings, and that's Patrick Mahomes. But Joe Burrow, for me, has thrown himself right into the rung just below, right into that group just below with the likes of Josh Allen. But when it comes to what he's going to have to overcome, I know you've got some numbers there about just how quickly he was getting rid of the ball. And that was plain to see on television, how quickly he's getting through his reads, his eye work to try and maintain some level of aggression. And we did see a low yardage performance from the Cincinnati Bengals. The 3 starters gone on an offensive line that had taken a step from shambolic to decent. And now we're moonwalking backwards down to shambolic. It's not just that they're losing starters. They're losing arguably their best starters. They've lost both pillars. Lyle Collins had bucked what I said, which I thought he was close to being out of the league and getting back to Pro Bowl level. He had certainly improved as the season had gone along. So you've lost both your outside tackle pillars. Then we see Kappa. I mean, this is very destructive, and it has a dismantling effect on how the Bengals have solved their season from going from a running game that's frustrated to going to shotgun runs, and how they've had to time that and execute that. How is that going to be impacted by the loss of this talent, this tier of talent? Burrow is going to have to play a brand of football that is exciting, but is the margin for error and the accuracy and trajectory control to maintain an aggressive downfield passing attack whilst having next to no time to protect yourself, particularly against, yes, the Buffalo Bills no longer have Von Miller active after he went down with injury, but they still have plenty of talent up front, and they've got nasty linebackers that will blitz out of nowhere. They will send Milano after you. They will send Edmonds after you. The matchup is really concerning with just such a glaring weakness. You get to the playoffs, especially get to the final 8, and everyone's a good team. Everyone's a good team. Every team has strengths, and quite often they're smart teams. They will know where that weakness is, and to have 1 or even 2 holes on your offensive line is something you can try and patch up with. You can lend blitz pickup help there. You can chip with a release to still get someone to support a struggling offensive lineman, still get someone out and a route. But to do it to 60% of your starting offensive line, this would have to be he's done it before, but Joe Burrow would have to take his tier of play to an even higher level, a whole new level of execution to have the Bengals, threatening to take out the AFC and emerge in another Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow did it last year, but that was despite a saloon door resistance offensive line. And it's a shame for Cincinnati because the offseason moves they made, not just in who they brought in, but also in the draft had panned out. And through 15 weeks, they started the same offensive line 15 times.
Yep.
It's not as though they lost 60% of the line over the course of the season. They lost 60% of their offensive line in the last month. They have had to learn this on the fly. And of the guys who are remaining, Cordell Volson, it looks like a home run draft pick in the 4th round, a guy they got out of North Dakota State, first team all rookie. He's been terrific. Ted Karras at center, great. But you lose both tackles. You lose Alex Kappa at right guard. And the numbers to which you alluded, Joe Burrow, average release in the win over the Ravens was 2.38 seconds. Average release per dropback and pass attempt. That's the second fastest of his career, and he was still sacked 4 times. And this is a Bengals team that over the course of the regular season went 13-4. 4 losses, Joe Burrow was sacked 20 times. In the 13 wins combined, he was sacked 21 times. So you're talking about a difference of 1.5 sacks taken per game in the wins versus 5 sacks taken per game in the losses. And if it weren't for the heroics of Sam Hubbard, then this may well have been a loss. And still, James Prochet for the Ravens had his fingertips on the ball, nearly hauled in a Hail Mary. And I imagine the Ravens would have gone for 2 in the win. The margins were that small for the Cincinnati team to get away with it. And this is a team that had in Cincinnati 234 yards of offense, their lowest of any Joe Burrow start. So for them to have finally found something of a reliable foundation, and no one was going to argue it was the best offensive line in the NFL, but it was, I think it's fair to say, reliable. Now have that kicked out from under them with no time to adjust. I don't understand why they're only getting 4 points in Buffalo. The Bills in the NFL, best defense reflexively, 49ers, number one scoring defense. Number two is the Bills. Okay, NFL, who's the best offense in the league reflexively? You may say the Bills, you may say the Chiefs. Well, the Chiefs are number one scoring offense, the Bills are two. I mean, the Bills are right there with the elite on both sides of the ball. You don't have margin for error. So unless, like you said, we have some schematic magic and mastery coming up from Zach Taylor, that's all they're going to be doing over the next week. I don't see how they keep this within a touchdown.
You mentioned he got sacked. Despite getting the ball out of his hands that quickly, he was sacked 4 times. He also hit another 4 times, 8 quarterback hits on the day. This is, at least in Monty Python, the Knight had, a limb cut off each time in a sequence. This is like all in the span of 3 seconds, 2 arms and a leg gone. At least there was some patience and some measurement to what he went through. This for the Bengals, look, the defense, wasn't without its faults and had, there were serious coverage issues and a long DeMarcus Robinson touchdown yesterday, but generally backed them to be well coached. You love seeing the way they use guy like Mike Hilton, so tough, so versatile, impacting in the pocket as well as in coverage. They can disrupt and they can, I backed them to have a very good game plan against the Buffalo Bills and a Bills team that showed, the word is sloppiness in their victory over the Miami Dolphins. But wow, offensively, whether that's moving the pocket, whether that is just a absurd amount of play action in each and every different bootleg, naked rollout direction you can come up with, but they have to change. They cannot play this game man on man in terms of the line of scrimmage. They can't play that man up 5-on-5 because of what they've lost. We said we're going to be about half an hour on the People's Mailbag. We've hit 36 minutes, so let's move on. But if you do have more questions, we'll absolutely filter them through, or just comments, ponderings, tears, joy, bliss, agony, nerves for some. Send them through. We'll bring them up. But all right, Phil, we're moving on from here. People's Mailbag is spent, but it's time to, we've perhaps mentioned his name so far, but someone that's going to get a little honors for being the best of the youngest in the NFL in the Wildcard Weekend.
Yes, Laz, it's time again for the Next Gen, brought to you by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. And we saw a very impressive turning radius from young Trevor Lawrence as the Jaguars stormed back from 27 down in an abysmal first half to have, we've been talking about the big, third biggest collapse in NFL playoff history. Other side of that coin, the third biggest comeback, third greatest comeback in NFL history for a guy who I almost want to call him a de facto rookie. I know this Next Gen is about a younger player, and Lawrence in his second season certainly qualifies, but I give him a massive pass on that first season. It was an unenviable situation with one of the most glaring head coaching failures we've seen in the last generation in Urban Meyer to the Jags. Lawrence now gets a more than capable coach in Doug Peterson. Front office, the spent more in free agency than anybody. And the Jags in the last half of the season, they stormed back from 3 games down on the ladder, claim the AFC South, get the divisional home game in the playoff home game in the wild card round, which is the divisional title. The do-of-all chance we're going. And Laz in the first half, 5 turnovers. 5. 4 were off of Lawrence's hand. He set a dubious Super Bowl era playoff record with 3 first quarter interceptions. I wanted to tell him and remind him, Trevor, you're on the teal team today, not on the blue one, not on the the one with the all whites. 5 first half turnovers. Last time we saw that in a playoff game was 1999. And coincidentally, the Jags were on the right side of that. It was Dan Marino's final game in the NFL. Jags won 62-7. 62-7. It was in 1999. That should have been the result of what happened. Laz, and then what happened after the 5 first half turnovers?
What happened? Well, what happened is people that have been sitting here talking about him being Trevor Lawrence being a top 6 quarterback in the end of the NFL season started to crow pretty loudly. Look, Trevor Lawrence reeling off, being 4 for 16 once that 4th interception landed with as many completions as he had interceptions at that point. And then going 24 for 31 the rest of the way, and you can even compress it even tighter when you remove another couple of misses here and there. But from that point on, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 2-point conversion, game-winning drive, composure, strikes to every point of the field. We saw downfield bombs when he saw coverage, and beautifully schemed deep touchdown on kind of deep over the left side of the field that completely bamboozled the Chargers scheme. The touch and the accuracy on these outbreaking routes, the intermediate part of the field, which he works so beautifully. The mental fortitude that young man showed, everything you described, everything they went through, that locker room went through under Urban Meyer in that calamitous 2021 campaign, those 11 weeks that it lasted. From that point to get where they are with a grown-up in the room in Doug Peterson, I've used this talking about that performance over the last couple of days, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up here. I mean, Ted Lasso says be a goldfish, right? Be like a goldfish, have a short memory. That's what Trevor Lawrence was. He was a damn goldfish. To overcome those traits that he's shown. Look, Trevor Lawrence, as part of the next gen of AFC quarterbacks, the ridiculous talent we have, the Final Four, there's no one over the age of 27 between Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lawrence. Is Lamar Jackson being part of that mix going forward? Justin Herbert, Tua, keep going on. But amongst that next gen, the talent is real. But the learning that the Jacksonville Jaguars can take away, where they're playing with house money from here on out, where they surpass all expectations even further and knock off the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round, whatever comes, they've achieved postseason success, and they know that their talented guy, everyone's got a talented guy, it seems, in the contenders in that conference, but their talented guy has a toughness, a mental fortitude, a composure, and a willingness to believe in himself and maintain aggression and belief in his skill set that he can continue to execute. From what you saw on the sideline, from what you saw even before halftime coming out with that touchdown drive, to just stop the flow for a minute. Incredibly impressive performance from what would have been such a low point in your playoff debut, to have those numbers, 5 turnovers for the team, 4 off your hand, to be in that low place and to put the foot down and climb all the way up out of that hill and rescue a ridiculous victory in the finest quarterback play that we've seen. As everyone say, Trevor Lawrence still undefeated on Saturdays and deservingly gets the honors for Wildcard Weekend.
Yeah, Laz, and you said we can compress the numbers further. I am keen to do that. First 7 drives for the Jags. First 7 times they took the field, offensive possession. All right, boys, 1st and 10, let's get the ball moving. Total, 5 for 18 passing for 35 yards and 4 interceptions. Whilst targeting receivers, he was 3 for 12 for 12 yards. 1 yard per attempt targeting wide receivers. Most quarterbacks want to be between 7.5 and 8. Obviously, they would take more, but that's 7.5 to 8 for an elite. A top 6 quarterback in the league is a good number. Last 5 drives. And you can appreciate this in any sporting code. You're out there, you feel like you have an insurmountable deficit, but then you start doing the math. And okay, if we can score here and stop them, and score here and stop them, and score here and stop them, and score here and stop them, you're saying there's a chance. And Lawrence just said, I'm going to do what I can do now. We're going to get a positive scoring drive before the half. Okay, we're going to come out in the second half. We're going to get another scoring drive. Hey, the defense made another stop. Now we can make this a 2-score game. And the digestible progress that he showed in the last 5 possessions, which had 4 touchdowns and then the essentially walk-off game-winning field goal, he went 23 for 29 for 253 yards, about 8.5 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, no picks. And while targeting wide receivers, toward whom he had 12 attempts and 12 yards in the first 7 drives, he went 17 for 22 for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. A night and day performance, margin for error taken away, yet perfect turning radius, complete U-turn. That's why Trevor Lawrence is our next gen honoree, brought to you by the next gen Ford Everest.
Oh, that was so thoroughly enjoyable. Like, that was deeply, whatever comes the rest of the football action today, which we will get to shortly, whatever comes, that 5 minutes spent on Trevor Lawrence's outrageous comeback.
Only would have been more appropriate if it were exactly 6 minutes, because you have just stuck to the fact that he is a top 6 quarterback in the NFL. But now Lassie gets a chance to prove it, because he's going to Arrowhead Stadium next week in the divisional round. We've seen one of the Jags' pillar quarterbacks of yesteryear, Mark Brunell, in the divisional round against the number 1 seed, my Broncos, in 1996. as 12-point underdogs, march into Mile High and dethrone John Elway and the mighty Broncos. The Broncos, next 2 years, they went on to win the Super Bowl. But you want to talk about writing the legend? Now he's at a place with the guys around him. We talked about this last year with Joe Burrow. If 9 is getting off the bus, 52 other men have a reason to believe. And now with Trevor Lawrence, you see those flowing locks walk past you on the bus. He's got his Beats by Dre on, walking past him. We're down 27. It's a second quarter. We still got a shot. 52 other men are going to believe in him and the head coach. And it gives you every reason to not write them off, because Kansas City, as incendiary as they are offensively, they are a flawed team. They are beatable. We've seen them drop games. We saw them go to OT against the Texans. So this is the team in the Jags that you don't quite write them off yet. And we will have trouble getting your head through the door if we wake up a week from today and they're in the AFC Championship game.
Look, you said it. He gets off the bus and 52 other players believe. He walks out of the locker room with the deficit. 52 other players believe that, in a couple of hours' time, they could be celebrating at Waffle House, which is exactly what they did. And I will just say that one more time, even if it does come to an end in 7 days' time, which is my pick because I have the Kansas City Chiefs winning the whole thing. Yeah. Even if it happens, one of those 52 guys next season is Calvin Ridley. Anyway, we move on. We move on for more things that we love, for more things that we get to celebrate. From the Super Wildcard Weekend. It is our Macca's I'm Loving It moment from the past 48 hours of thrilling football action. And Phil, this is a hometown story this week, isn't it? We go to the state of Ohio, to a kid that grew up and born and raised in the city of Cincinnati and turned a game in one of the loudest cheers I think I've ever heard. And we've heard some raucous applauses across this season. We celebrated one 7 days ago with what we saw in Buffalo, but this time it was in the jungle, and one man that played high school football in that state, that played college football in that state, and now wears the black and orange for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yes, Laz, when this happened, I sent you a text and I said, this is our Macca's I'm Loving It moment. Without question, Sam Hubbard has Ohio pulsing through his veins. Front seven player, you mentioned it, Archbishop Moeller High School, which is a terrific program. They send a lot of players to the Division I level, have a couple players that have gone to the NFL. Sam is one of them. It is an 18-minute drive from the Bengals stadium. So this kid grew up. That was the home team. That was the partisan support. He is born in Cincinnati, stays in state for University at Ohio State, gets the opportunity. Bengals hadn't ever won playoff games in consecutive seasons in the entire franchise history. So not only is Sam looking up the road at this program, but he's looking up the road at Cincinnati after going to one of the great collegiate programs in Ohio State, a team that's defined by consistent winning. And yes, it's the hometown team, but man, we got to get some culture shifting around here. Their back's up against the wall. Their offense is struggling to put together drives. They are a yard from the goal line. And I don't fault Tyler Huntley for it. It was an aggressive play to reach the ball out with two hands. We saw Trevor Lawrence reach out with one hand in the Jags at the 2-point conversion for the Jags come back, and it worked beautifully in his favor. But inevitably, when a quarterback does the snap, extend the ball over the plane of the goal line play, may end up a few centimeters short. Cincinnati alertly punched it out into the hands of one Mr. Sam Hubbard. And Sam, about face, goes 98 yards to the black and orange painted grass of the end zone. What seemed like it was a certain 7-point deficit became a 7-point lead, gave us our final score, a 14-point swing, the longest fumble return in NFL postseason history, and the longest lead-changing fumble return in the fourth quarter or OT in regular or postseason history. Biggest play of the weekend, perhaps the most significant individual play we will see all playoffs. And Laz, it wasn't as though it was a straight 98-yard sprint. Sam had to cover some ground.
He did. It was 123.6 yards of just sprinting all out Cincinnati, pulsating legs to the end zone. And you know what that tells us? On a 98-yard touchdown return, fumble return for a touchdown, if you go 123.6 yards, you're doing what every young Australian and Kiwi is told on a rugby field when someone is chasing you down and you are set for the try line. You weave. You get your weave on. You make it hard on the chasing player. I mean, Sam Hubbard put Mark Andrews in a position where he clocked his fastest time at around 20.72 miles per hour. I'll let you do you like to represent, you show your love for Australia by doing the calculations there. So I'll let you convert that to kilometers per hour. But he hit his,
I think it's like 32 kilometers per hour.
He hit his career high mark. Mark Andrews on the chase there, and it still wasn't good enough. I know there's some freeze frames out there claiming block in the back. We're not hearing any of that. This one was too good to be true. There was no debating.
He was fishing for that block in the back. That was to get in front of the player and slow down. Come on.
But I will say, there was no debate for us about who was getting the honors for the I'm loving it moment of the week. The only thing, thank you, buddy. The only thing that is left for debate now, when it comes to this play, is it going to be known as the fumble in the jungle, or is it going to be known as the 100-yard dash? What do we get? Where does it land? We'll leave that up to the people to decide. This is the
Brekkie Show audience weigh in. As a fight guy, I love my MMA. I love my boxing. I'm on fight camp. The fumble in the jungle is pretty good, man. 100-yard dash has some potential, but but that's the thing. And Brad, that was the difference, right? You not just factor in the hype and then the reach as well. And I didn't know they already had the chip in the football. They were talking about, the chip in the ball proved that it was short of the goal line technology. Why we can't do that on every snap is beyond me.
Oh, let's save that for off-season shows, Phil, where we fix what the NFL needs us to hone and craft and shape. But yes, so much positivity over the last 15 minutes of this show, Phil, and we've made our way, as we tend to we've had individual awards, we've had individual moments, despite being celebrated by the masses. Now it's time for a little duality with our NFL tag team champions of the world for the week. This time, a wild version, a pay-per-view version, if you will. And for me, across the board,
I'll let you tee it up. But when you look at the names that you put in our rundown, their nicknames, it feels like a Dudley Boys kind of like cousins we found.
CMC and Debo. It certainly does sound like that.
Look, get the tables.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did to the Seattle Seahawks in the second half. They put the Seahawks defense through the tables. Look, credit to the Seahawks. They played this thing tight early on. They took some big swings downfield. They did what they could to contain that San Francisco 49ers offense in the first half. But the word for the second half was overwhelming, and that was led by these two, Debo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, combining for over 301 total scrimmage yards, rushing and receiving, 2 touchdowns, 1 apiece, 9 first downs, so much game-breaking talent there. Brock Purdy gets a lot of headline here because the rookie quarterback story, a day 3 pick with ties, not just ties to the Bay Area, but literally playing in the Bay Area, leading a ridiculous winning streak. We're up at 11 games in a row now. And Super Bowl aspirations, that's obviously going to get thrown around recklessly and wildly with a name that may rhyme with shady. But not all of Brock Purdy's passes were on target or out in front of their receiver where you want them to run onto it. There was a little lateness. Sometimes it was a bit behind. Thankfully, these wide receiving options were all sorts of open, all sorts of just surrounded by nothing. I've said it before, but surrounded by nothing but hopes and dreams. He did his job to get the ball in their vicinity, but the likes of McCaffrey and Debo, there's some, we might get some in the ring help. Maybe Brandon Ayuk runs in midway through the TLC match with a chair or a table or TL ladder. But this one, those two headliners, Debo back and healthy, and CMC continuing this ridiculous 7 touchdowns in a row, 7 games in a row with a score. This ridiculous explosion that he has helped fuel or been central to fueling since arriving partway through the season. Deserved tag team champions. And Phil, I know you've got some, far more insightful numbers and stats to show just how dominant those two were.
Hey, just some context. If you want to be the smartest guy at the pub this weekend, just tuck these away. The Niners, you mentioned, it was a close game at the half. And we thought, man, Super Wildcard Weekend, kicking off, it was the first game of Super Wildcard Weekend. Could we be in store for perhaps what would have been the biggest upset? Maybe you could argue Dolphins beating the Bills. Yeah, I would say that would have been a bigger upset. But second to that would have been Seahawks-Niners. Seattle led by a point at the half. And San Francisco won by 18. It's the 4th biggest win in NFL playoff history for a team that was trailing at the half. They were playing with their food before they ate it. And we mentioned the fact that, we had Super Wildcard Weekend. We've had 5 games. 4 of them have been terrific. This is the one that in the latter stages, you kind of tuned out because there was no more parity. We knew how it was going to end. Deebo Samuel, 133 receiving yards. 109 Laws were after the catch. 2 guys in the NFL this season have 100 yards after the catch in a game. You know who they are? Deebo Samuel and Deebo Samuel. Those are the 2. That's it. Nobody else has done it. He's done it twice, and he did it in the playoffs. And now Christian McCaffrey, who was a mid-season acquisition, by the way, has now set a San Francisco 49ers franchise record, decent franchise, for consecutive games with a touchdown by a running back. You have those 2, and oh, by the way, George Kittle. I'm not taking anything away from Brock Purdy, but you have the right horses around him. And
Elijah Mitchell's a top 20 back in the NFL, and he's their backup.
I mean, it is staggering the amount of talent they have offensively at skill positions. And oh, by the way, the number 1 defense in the NFL. Be very afraid, rest of NFL. The San Francisco 49ers team, despite the mistakes in the first half and some miscues, and they started slow against Arizona in Week 18. Maybe that's where you have to get them is early, because once they get ahead, Kyle Shanahan and his staff can make in-game adjustments. They are hard to stop. And Laz, next week, they get the winner of today's game between the Cowboys and Bucks. It is the first game of the divisional round, but bad news for the Cowboys and Bucks winner. San Francisco has a 2-day jump on rest and prep.
Oh, maybe I need a 2-day jump on you to claw back my deficit in propaganda. Did you like that segue? Did you like how we got there, Phil? But it is time. We have hit the 56-minute mark. Can we get out of here before an hour? There is. Probably not. Let's try. Propaganda. I'm in the rear here. I'm sure you have exactly how big the trailing margin is.
3.76 units, $3.76.
Sure. And here's how I start to peg that back. Rashad White, Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back, over 15.5 yards receiving today. I think the Dallas Cowboys struggle to play as much man coverage as perhaps they'd like, given their issues at the second cornerback spot. And I think if you're seeing them fall back into, if you're seeing them play less press, if they are playing off a little more, playing a bit of cover 2, it opens up those kind of dump offs in the middle of the field there. And I think Rashad White, the Cowboys struggle to defend screens at times. They're an athletic defense, but with some of the linebackers, depending how much we see, Leighton Vander Esch makes his way back. But if there's periods with, Anthony Barr and his ability to move side to side as opposed to downhill at this point of his career, Damone Clark was promising, but isn't a seasoned mental key and key react and diagnostician at the linebacker spot. He's so early in his career. You could see Brady doing some work in that part of the field. So I've got Rashad White at 205. Gamble responsibly, gamble within your means. At $2.05. That's my first prop. See White go over that 15.5 mark.
See, Laz, I don't think it's in the Cowboys to play conservatively. Not that I'm disagreeing with your tip, but we've seen them be so aggressive all season. And this is the time to do it. You have Tom Brady, who had the shortest average release time by a margin of any quarterback in the NFL. They're not really liking, 7-step drops, double moves, which teams that do that tend to have success upfield against the Cowboys. I think it's going to be a lot of first reads and goes. And if the Cowboys jump those routes, as we've seen them do for the better part of 18 weeks, I think Tom Brady's going to throw an interception in this game. And that's why I have Tom Brady at over half a pick at $1.83. That is my first tip.
Well, playing into that, and perhaps it extends all the way to, this is where it all turns, Phil. This is where I flip it on its head. At $7.75, the Dallas Cowboys defense and or special teams do have a touchdown. I think there is a turnover in this game. I think there is an opportunity in this game. I would hope that the Cowboys, after what happened in the playoffs last year, they're showing in Week 18, but really thinking back to the out-physicaled nature of their loss, the fact that they were dominated at the line of scrimmage, that they come to play and play physically. I hope they play aggressively. I hope they are playing a lot of press and they're playing tight man coverage and giving no easy receptions to Tom Brady and that wide receiver core. See how much you can do that. If it's Xavier Rhodes out there playing the second cornerback spot, we will see fresh off the couch. But I'm going to lean towards one of the game-breaking talents, whether that's Trayvon Diggs, a name we were talking about before the show, Jerron Bland, who is an unheralded, he's not going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, but he should be an honorable mention for what he's done at a very tough spot, the slot corner spot. I've left you 40 seconds after I finish, not even. Or Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, someone to pluck that ball away. Perhaps it's Malik Hooker. Take it to the house. Turn that ball over, or maybe Kevontae Turpin, who has, I would say, underperformed versus preseason expectations at the returning spot. I think there's a touchdown here, and I like those big odds there to flip the field and get me back into the lead in our little contest.
Yeah, it was $7.75 that we were going to do this segment in under 5 minutes. So clearly that wasn't going to happen. But Laz, I want to paint a picture for you. You mentioned Deron Bland, and you said, hey, Leighton Vander Esch is back. Deron Bland also back in the lineup. He's been terrific. If he gets a pick six on the first snap, both of my props will hit, and your big money one would. And I think if my reflexive math serves, you would pull into the lead. But my prop reason that would work is because Deron Bland wears what, number 29? 26. He's 26 for the Cowboys. My prop is the jersey number of the first touchdown scorer will be over 18.5. I love props like this. On the surface, it seems silly, but then you start to break down the layers. Yep. If the Cowboys skill position players score first, Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, not Michael Gallup, he wouldn't count. Nope. Dalton Schultz would. If for the Bucs, Rachaad White scores first, but then you couldn't do Leonard Fournette or Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or down the line. Any of their tight ends would qualify. And it pays $1.80 for the first touchdown scorer to be over 18.5. So the juice is on the under 18.5, but it's because I believe the Cowboys are going to get off to a hot start. I believe that is the Hollywood script for this is up 6, a minute 40 left. Bucs have a timeout. They got to go 83 yards. I think that is what we are in store for. So I do lean Cowboys early. I lean Cowboys late. I know you disagree. It's why I didn't rock my creamsicle orange Bucs shirt today, because I think the Cowboys get this done, and I think they head to San Francisco for a playoff matchup replete with postseason history.
Look, I'd like to separate my brain from my heart when talking about the NFL. I'm particularly talking about this team from North Texas. There's no doubt who I want to win. The chain's on. The beads are on, I should say. The Letterman 1973 special is on. The tights are on for America's team. But I do have I look 5 for 5 so far this weekend, and I've got Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
As am I. This is our one point of dissension. You and I both tipped the Giants in last week's show. We both tipped the Jags. Looked dicey, looked dodgy there at the start. This was the one game on which we disagreed, and
I sincerely hope you're
propaganda right. Because just the schedule of games, this is the Monday night finale. We don't have a propaganda. This is our regular season finale, and we'll do this again for Super Bowl. But I think this may decide, at least where we head into Super Bowl, who's on top.
This is someone's going to leave. Someone's going to leave victorious. I sincerely hope it's you in this fashion, but my fear about that matchup and what Tom Brady can do against linebackers, not named Leighton Vander Esch, and what he can do picking at that outside cornerback 2 spot opposite from Trayvon Diggs' side. Do they send Trayvon Diggs to travel with a Mike Evans, Deron Bland to travel with a Chris Godwin and take their chances with Julio and Russell Gage? It's still a matchup win for I almost said the P word there. No, not the Patriots, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady, 7-0 against Dallas Cowboys. If the Cowboys are going to make a run here, they need to slay some dragons. That starts with never having beaten Tom Brady. Then, if they're lucky enough to move on, it's San Francisco 49ers. Not just a historic matchup, but a humbling recent matchup with what the 49ers just bully balled against the Cowboys in the playoffs last time out. And then if they got through that, who would be waiting in the conference title game? Oh, quite possibly. Well, it'll be a divisional rival, but very much quite possibly could be. You'd have to tip the Philadelphia Eagles could be waiting, or just that Giants pesky franchise that has recent rings over the Cowboys, if not a lot of recent victories. So dragon slaying to come. We will see. Coaching change to come. That's one of the mailbag questions I got. If the Cowboys aren't victorious, do we see a coaching change? I think that I'd say that conversation is far more open than Jerry Jones' recent comments would suggest. I'm in lockstep with Stephen A. Smith on this one. I think there was some absolute a little sneaky sauce, a little fibbery on offer there from Jerry. Rightfully so, ahead of that matchup, not wanting to pour any more gasoline on the fire, add any more pressure. But I think the pressure is all on the Cowboys here. Time for the likes of Dak Prescott to lead that team and show them, look, the ceiling, the talent is there. They have, in my opinion, they have more talent to work with and more talent, more than enough to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the long sample size, the large sample size. They played the better football this season. but how they're coming in and the pressure that's surrounding them versus Brady and the Bucs, who found a little bit of health, some of the big names on defense coming back. Ryan Jensen back in the starting lineup, it sounds like, at center today, and just that little bit of mojo and a little bit of chemistry that seems to have clicked into gear for the Buccaneers passing game of late. Oh boy, it's going to be an afternoon here in the ESPN Australia New Zealand office of Sydney in Moore Park. I know my colleagues are thoroughly enjoying the tension that I'll be walking in with the Stars and Stripes tights on.
Well, with that, we bid you adieu. This has been the NFL Brekkie Show presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. The Monday night finale, Tuesday midday, Tuesday early Arvo, is Cowboys at Bucs. My good friend, the lovely, talented Charlie Arnold, will be on the sideline providing you updates. And of course, Laurie and I will be here next week as my TV turns off behind me and we say goodbye. Thank you for joining us.